I am Marcy. I am known as the Fitness Baker, and I made a beautiful loaf of oatmeal maple bread today. And it is the summertime, but regardless of what you have in your kitchen, any time of year, these are my 6 top tips to end up with the best bread that you may not have known. Number 1, use quality ingredients and check the expiration date before use. When we were going through the beginnings of our lockdown with COVID, everybody rushed to the store, bought tons of flour, and I am an avid baker and I had a hard time finding some of it. So if you have it now, a couple of things you want to know. Again, you want to maybe freeze your larger bags of flour because they are going to keep for a longer period of time, especially in the summertime when there's moisture. You know, there are definitely things like the little moths that you might get if your flour is older. So make sure, put them in a gallon-sized Ziploc bag and stick them in your freezer, and they will keep, and you can bake with them long into the holiday season. If you have had flour for a couple of years in your cabinets and you're like, well, I still have flour, I don't need to buy any, you need to go check the expiration date because this is a product that will go rancid and your baked goods won't taste very good at all. So if you're going to put the time into baking, know that you need to make sure that you take care of the flour when you have it. And if you don't freeze it, then again, really go by the expiration date, toss it, and invest in your new quality ingredients. So that is for number 2. So you can, well, that was kind of 1 and 2. You want to make sure that you're buying quality ingredients. And number 2, you want to make sure that you store it correctly and you want to check the expiration date. Now, if you have flour and it's been sitting out for, say, a month, you go to use it, you're scooping it out, you're going to measure, and it's very dense because flour is going to settle. So if you were to go in here as is, pack your flour in your measuring cup, you are going to have way more flour in your recipe, even though the volume of flour is fitting in your cup. So you can do 2 things. 1, which if you've taken a baking class with me or if you followed me already, if you have not, make sure you subscribe to my channel so you won't miss out on these fabulous tips. And you're going to fluff your flour first, and all that means is you're bringing some air in there. So you can take your measuring cup, you can take a spoon, and I understand if you don't want to spoon it in, but this is another way that you can just kind of sprinkle it in, especially in summertime, especially if it's a flour that you don't use all the time. Make sure that you consider doing that because, again, you are going to have way more flour for your recipe than it's called for. Your other option is to use a scale. I've taken multiple classes at King Arthur Flour, and they are recommending people to use a digital scale because weight is weight. It's not going to be inaccurate. You are going to make sure you get the amount of flour that you need, and it uses up less dishes because you can put all your dry ingredients. You don't have to individually wash all your measuring cups. So consider investing something like this. If you are even, you maybe not be an avid baker, but if you have room in your kitchen, definitely worth it. All right, number 4, yeast. Make sure that you are able to check the expiration date of your yeast because your yeast is what makes bread rise. If you don't get yeast and use it correctly, you will not get a fluffy bread. You will get unleavened bread, which is certainly something I've had before. But if you're looking for something that looks like this, you're going to want to make sure you do 2 things. You can either get rapid rise and you can get instant or regular yeast. Again, look at your expiration if you are buying this. Again, I keep it in the freezer. I buy it a pound bag from King Arthur Flour. You can also buy it online. This is instant. I put it in a Ziploc bag, keep it in my freezer, and as long as it's labeled, again, I go through about 2 pound bags, so 2 1-pound bags per year, so I never worry about it going bad. If, this is a side tip for yeast, if you put hot liquid in your yeast bread, you will kill your yeast and you will be a yeast murderer. And I don't want that for you because that would be sad. Plus, your bread is not going to come out the way you want. So make sure you use lukewarm to cool water, and then you just may have to increase the amount of time you let it rise or increase the amount of time that you're going to knead your bread so you would be able to have a nice, fluffy, gluten-filled, if you're not gluten sensitive, loaf of bread. All right, so number 5, take a flour shower. And what I mean by that is when you are kneading your bread And instead of like at the very end of your knead, if you have done it properly, you shouldn't have much stickiness to your fingers, but you're still gonna get part of the dough on your fingers. Don't go to your sink right away because you are gonna clog up your septic and your drain. So what you would do is a flour shower, and you take a little bit of extra flour that you might have on your counter, so consider doing that. And you're actually gonna take a little bit of excess flour and rub your hands together and get all areas. I actually can take a little bit more off my hands right now, and this isn't immediate. And I'm just gonna go ahead and rub all of the dry pieces of the sticky dough off my fingers, and it comes onto my counter instead of down my drain. It's a super effective trick. So I want you to remember that. Now, the number 6 tip, which again, if you're a big cleaning person, if you've been afraid of doing baking because it just makes a hot mess or sticky mess, whatever it is, consider using either a dough scraper or a spatula. Works really well. You do not, flashing lights, you do not want to use a wet sponge to a bunch of flour on your counter. You are going to end up with paper mache, and you are going to have a sticky mess, and after you just took your flour shower, you're going to get all messy again. So what you would do is take a spatula, scrape up any areas that you have, and then you would just scoop it into your hands, and the last little streaks that are left there, you can go ahead and take your wet sponge to clean completely. But you're not going to end up feeling like you have like Braille on your counter, or a month or week from now, you can still feel that sticky dough on your counter, okay? So go ahead and make sure you scrape it up first. Then once you get down to this level, then you can go ahead and take your wet sponge, because otherwise the sponge is going to get all nasty on the bottom. Toss that sucker. Okay, so in the end, you're going to save if you follow these tips, and you're going to end up with your best bread possible. So if you have not already subscribed, which I mentioned earlier, please do. Leave me a comment if you have any other tips for me that I could learn from you. I would love it. There are experienced bakers all around the world that I adore. And until then, bon appetit and best baking.